Hey everyone, it's Kevin, and in this video, I'm going to tell you how to urge surf so you can stop binge eating, stop overeating, and control what you eat. If you want to control what you eat, control your body, and control your life, then hit the subscribe button so you never miss a video. The concept of surfing the urge means you accept an uncomfortable feeling or an uncomfortable urge and you just experience it without doing what the urge wants you to do. For example, if you have the urge to overeat a bunch of salt, sugar, and fat, surfing the urge means you don't do it, but you accept and experience that urge. The key is to not actually satisfy the urge and give it what it wants. Easier said than done. Urges come from the deep, primitive part of our brain, and it tells us to do something that we don't want to do. It tells us to do this because it feels like we need to do it to survive. The origins of the urges are different for everybody. For me, it was a really restrictive diet. It was cutting out a lot of different food groups. It was deliberately cutting calories, it was over-exercising, it was all of that, and so it developed these really powerful urges in my brain to make me do things like overeat and binge and chew and spit that I didn't want to do. Learning to deal with these urges is absolutely critical if you want to have greater control over what you eat. Now here's the thing, you can't get rid of the urges, but you certainly can control the way you respond to them. My first point is surfing the urge means you experience the urge and you just accept it for what it is. Like I just said, you can't control the urge itself. It's going to be there. It's like trying to control all the thoughts in your head. You can't control the thoughts in your head. I know that's a really uncomfortable feeling and we would like to not think about certain things, but the truth is we only have so much control over that, but we can respond to those urges and those thoughts in a different way. And when you surf the urge, what you're doing is just accepting the feeling, recognizing it, and just doing something else. Now sometimes, especially at first, it's going to be really uncomfortable to do that because you really want to do what that urge is telling you. Because when you do what the urge is telling you to do, the urge goes away. It's like if you have a little child that's screaming and throwing a temper tantrum because it wants a toy or it wants, some type of food or whatever, and you satisfy that screaming child by giving it what it wants. But what are you doing? You're only reinforcing that behavior because the child knows that when it screams really loud, it's going to get what it wants because every time it screams, you give it what it wants. Now, the only way to deal with this problem is to not give the child what it wants, and then eventually over time, the child will learn not to do that. But what happens the first few times you do that? The child screams and screams and screams, and you just have to accept it. That's what surfing the urge is. So if you have the inclination to overeat, eat something that you shouldn't, break your diet, whatever, the first few times are going to be the worst. Just understand that with practice and over time, it gets easier to do that, and those urges become less powerful and less frequent. My next point is consider watching the surf from the beach. If you're on a beach, you're just lying there in the sun, having a good time, tanning your butt, whatever, and you're seeing the surf and you're seeing these surfers fall into the water and they're trying to keep their balance. It's actually kind of entertaining to watch that, but it's not entertaining when you're the surfer falling. So sometimes it's easier to just detach yourself from the urge and detach yourself from the feeling and think to yourself, this urge is coming from some part of my brain and it's a really errant belief. It doesn't mean anything. I can't control it. I don't have to respond to it. And that's what's really important. So when you just detach yourself from that urge and you separate yourself mentally and you realize that that urge is coming from a different part of your brain, then it's really easy to just say no and move on. Now that urge might keep screaming and screaming, but it's like a Florida thunderstorm in the middle of summer. It's here one minute and it's gone the next. The problem is that until now you've been dealing with these urges in a really disempowered or immature way. Every time you get that uncomfortable feeling, you deal with it by grabbing the one thing, more food, more salt, more fat, sugar, whatever, the one thing that's creating those urges in the first place, and you're just reinforcing those urges. The next thing I want to say is ask yourself, why are you getting these cravings in the first place? Where did they come from? It's not like you've always had these cravings. There was one point in your life where you were a normal, typical eater. There was a time in life when I was like that in my late teens. And then in my early 20s, I became a really restrictive eater. I had to follow a certain regimen every day, and that's when all my problems started. Go back in time and ask yourself the last time you were completely normal and you weren't having these thoughts and cravings. These cravings and urges come from somewhere. You need to be introspective sometimes and look at your timeline, figure out where things went wrong. To me, this is the first step in recovery. You have to figure out where things went wrong to figure out where you are now and where you want to go. My next tip for you is ask yourself this question the next time you get an urge. What if I don't satisfy the urge? Interesting. Well, you can find out by not satisfying the urge, right? The next time you get that urge, just think, you know what, this time I'm not going to do it. And just experience what happens. This is what surfing is. The worst that can happen is that you have this uncomfortable thought in your head, and you feel agitated, you feel kind of restless, a little excited. You have this anticipation of getting some pleasure, and you're thinking to yourself, this is going to be really good, this is going to be great, it's going to feel good. But just once, that's all I'm asking. Just experience it. And then you'll realize what happens when you don't do it. And you'll realize that the urges are only temporary. They're here one minute, they're gone the next. They come and go. And you realize that your life is better because you're not harming yourself. You're going to hit those weight loss goals. You're going to look better. You're going to feel better. You're going to sleep better. There's probably 50 benefits of not satisfying the urge, and there's probably only one benefit of satisfying the urge. And that one benefit is that you get rid of the urge. A lot of times we're not really addicted to the substance. We're addicted to the uncomfortable feelings and the uncomfortable cravings that the substance has created. This is probably the hardest thing about addiction recovery, is that you get these urges, and the easiest way, the easiest escape is to give the urge what it wants. But you've got to go through a period of time when you have these urges, and it's really uncomfortable and really inconvenient to ignore those urges and keep going. But I'm telling you, it's like a crucible. Once you get through that period, it becomes a lot easier. It's like at the beginning of a football season where all the players are going through training camp and players are getting cut, and the coaches are trying to figure out which players are going to be the best. That's what this is like. You have to get through that 4 or 5 weeks of training camp before you can get to the regular season. My next tip for you is to slow down. A lot of times when we get an urge, we just want to satisfy it, give it what it wants, and then move on. I think a much more empowered solution to that is to recognize that urge for what it is, understand where it's coming from, understand that you can't do anything about that urge, but also understand that you are a human and you have a prefrontal cortex, and you can plan for the future, you can predict, you know what's going to happen if you binge or overeat or whatever. You know what the outcome already is. You are human, and ultimately you have the final decision, as uncomfortable as that is. And a lot of times it's not convenient or comfortable to make the right decision. A lot of times it's convenient and comfortable to say yes when you should say no, and say no when you should say yes. And this is my next point for you. You always have a choice, no matter what situation you're in, no matter how uncomfortable the feeling is, no matter how powerful the urge is, you always have that final choice. You must believe this. If you don't believe it, recovery is going to be really hard, because you're going to think that you need something else to fix your problem. You need better circumstances, a better environment. Something else has to fix the problem. You have to believe that you have the choice, that you are an empowered person, that you have the potential of making right choices in the moment. My next tip for you is to don't run from bad feelings, just accept them. You can't control your feelings and your thoughts all the time. We're human, okay? Sometimes we have a bad day, we're going to feel bad. It would be kind of weird if you had a really bad day, like let's say you broke up with your boyfriend or something, and you went around smiling. Like, that just wouldn't be real, right? You can't be happy all the time. You can't feel a certain way all the time. You have to have black and white, ups and downs, peaks and valleys. That's how life is. When you get an uncomfortable feeling or you get that urge, just accept it for what it is. It's fine. We get cravings. We like certain things. Our brains are stupid. Our brains like instant gratification. Our brains like things that provide temporary relief. Just accept it for what it is. It's always going to be that way. Don't run from these feelings. Accept them. I read a story one time of a thunderstorm in Colorado and the different ways that cows and bison respond to a thunderstorm. As the thunderstorm is approaching from the west, the bison will run towards the storm. So they're running as fast as they can one way, and then the storm is going this way. So they spend less time in the storm. Whereas the cows, or maybe it was a sheep, I forget, they started running away from the storm, which prolonged the misery. Confront these feelings head on, like a bison and a Colorado thunderstorm. Confront the feelings. Don't run from them. My last tip for you is to give yourself time to build this skill. You're not going to be superhuman tomorrow. You're not going to be a hero. You're not going to be, the Incredible Hulk. You're not going to be Jocko Willink or some Navy SEAL who can, suffer for days upon end. That's not going to be you. That's not me. Unfortunately, you don't have to be like a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger or whatever to deal with this problem. The more times you deal with these uncomfortable urges and these uncomfortable feelings, the easier life is going to be in the long run. But it starts today. You have to start practicing now. Self-control, self-discipline, self-mastery really is a really difficult skill to develop, and it takes months, years to develop it. I'm not saying it takes years to stop overeating or binge eating. You can probably do that in a few weeks. I've heard of even faster than that. But you need to start now. You need to start practicing, because pretty soon you're going to have another opportunity to practice this. You're going to get some urge, some craving, some thought, something stupid in your head that says eat, 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 or purge, 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 when you know you shouldn't do that. Use that next opportunity as an opportunity to practice. I hope these tips help you surf the urge or learn how to urge surf. Let me know which of these tips is going to help you the most. Let me know in the comments below. If you have any other tips, also leave those in the comments below. If you want more videos on controlling what you eat and controlling your body, then check out some of my other videos, and I'll see you in the next one.